Welcome to the stage of the Royal Festival Hall, Sir Patrick. I think you know that you're in company who know your work and are looking forward to having some insights into your remarkable life. And one of the great things, if you haven't had a chance to open the book yet, is it's full of amazing photographs, and we're going to show you a few of them. So if we could put the slides up, the first two. We think sometimes of your career on Star Trek as traveling to other worlds, but this is Mirfield in the 1940s, which in many ways is a lost world. It's another planet. Can you tell us about this is you and your mum, isn't it, on the left, and you and your brother?
It is. My mother, Gladys Stewart, a dear, sweet, shy and modest woman who gave the first 5 years of my life a sense of absolute bliss and pleasure. And the other photograph is my brother Trevor, who's a little older than me, and my dog Rover. And that was my life. My father was away in the army in the Second World War, and I didn't really, he came home once, but I was too young to have remembered it. And then when the war ended, he entered my life and things became very different.
Well, one of the amazing things about your journey is it's no secret that your home life was very poor. It was a one up, one down, outside toilet. And you've also been very honest in the book about the fact that there was domestic violence in your home. And you've gone on to be, I think, an ambassador for refuge. Tell us about how, well, you write in the book about how if you could travel through time, the truth is, all I want to do is revisit the past. Perhaps I could have made things happier. And I wonder what you mean.
I know that it is not unusual for children who experience stressful or even perhaps frightening childhoods, that they can be susceptible to taking responsibility for the problems and the unhappiness, finding some way of blaming it on themselves. And certainly I did. I did love my father. I admired him. He had finished his war service as a superstar. He was the regimental sergeant major of the newly formed parachute regiment and had seen a lot of close combat and survived it. He has given me a great deal in my career and life. His strength, self-discipline, which was intense, and dedication to the work that he was doing. I didn't find that difficult because I'd fallen in love with acting when I was still a teenager, and so it was not too solemn an activity for me at all. It was one of fun and pleasure.
Tell us about the world of acting, because what really comes across reading your memoir is the Mirfield and the Yorkshire you grew up in was full of amateur dramatic clubs, yes, lots of opportunity and scholarships to drama school. And I think, well, we've got a couple more pictures. Can we put up the next ones? Because is this you and your mum and dad on your first trip to Stratford-upon-Avon on the left?
It is. I don't know who was driving. Oh, it must have been my brother Geoffrey who was driving the car, because my parents never owned a car and couldn't drive. And on the right is myself standing in what looks like a bar, and although it wasn't in a pub. I worked in a furniture store, a very, very superior furniture store. Oh yes, it was thought to be one of the very best, and the items that we sold were beautiful and expensive, particularly the carpets. But someone took this photograph of me in my formal. We were made to dress up in this store, and it is a comfortable shot because it expresses the great pleasure I got out of being a salesman for a year.
And you learnt a bit about how to act, didn't you? By how you dealt with the customers, like working out what accent to use with the customers.
Yes. We served customers in an order. The owner, if ever he was in, and he often came in on Saturdays, which was our busiest day, he would take the first customer. The general manager would take the second, the assistant manager one would take the third, the assistant manager two would take the fourth, and if there were a fifth, it was me. So I didn't serve very much, but I had fun with it because I don't think anybody had tipped me off to do this, but I played a little game. I would watch carefully the front door if I knew I was the next one up for a customer. And the moment that they appeared, I would assess them and make a judgment on what kind of person they wanted to have selling them furniture. And I would become that person. I mean, did they want someone who spoke with a broad Yorkshire accent like this and said, "Hello, come in, and what can I do for you?" My family still say that I can't do that. But, I did very well because a percentage of every sale went into the pocket of the man who had made the sale possible. I had meant to say this evening before we began that I'm so grateful to you all for coming for this event tonight. The experiences, my experiences of the last few weeks, not to say months, were totally unexpected in my life. I had never considered writing a book. I love books. Books became an important part of my life from the age of 6 when I discovered the county library in the little town of Mirfield I was growing up in. And yet, I never became fully confident. And although literature impressed me, I had no ambition to try to achieve something myself in that form. So thank you very much for coming. I have to confess, and I'm sure it will get better, I am overwhelmed to be sitting on this stage in this auditorium. I have been, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have seen concerts and I have seen solo artists here. Great distinction and excitement. And although I did do 2 performances here with the Royal Shakespeare Company of a production of a play called EGBDF, Every Good Boy Deserves Favor. Did anybody see it? No?
Tom
No.
Stoppard. They might be a little bit young. Your career has extended over so many decades.
It was 2 performances, that's all.
Yeah.
But being back here and being backstage, and because I didn't realize until tonight we were in the festival hall. I thought we were in a much smaller side place. And so I'm still trying to settle myself down and accept that this is actually
Sir
happening.
Patrick, you're the main stage. You are the main stage.
Thank you.
So, perfect way to ask you, about the fact that you did discover this love of acting and being on a stage at a young age. And we've got a picture of you, again, on the left. I wonder if people can spot, without looking at the book, which one you are. You want to tell us? And the one on the right, we'll talk about in a moment. I chose that one. But this is a very important theatre course you did as a child, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because it was a performance that we were giving at a West Riding County Council drama department residential course at Whitsuntide.
I should just say who you are, which is you're the Harlequin on the front row.
I'm sitting on the left, on the front row, as Harlequin, but I wonder if there are any other faces you recognize there. 1, 2, 3 faces from the right wearing a white wig is Brian Blessed. And
how did the universe contain both of you in the same county at the same time?
Brian came from Mexborough, and that was very close to my hometown as well. The very tall man on the left was Norman Lambert, who came from Barnsley. So we were all, and the second from the right was Trevor Parks, who also came from Murfield. We were all amateur actors, and it was extraordinary growing up in that environment, because I have been told by other actors who began work very young that it was not their experience, but you were not considered weird or odd or self-exhibiting if you were an actor. Every church and chapel, and there were about a dozen of them in Murfield, had its own drama group. And so many people were amateur actors. And it was not therefore unusual, and there was no pressure. There was no sense of you know, trying to escape from who you were to be somebody else, although that did play a quite significant part in it, because I found that I liked being somebody else much better than I liked being Patrick Stewart. And but that was the last Saturday night performance of, I think, a late 19th century play that we did. Who the actors are on the right in that other photograph, I have no idea.
Oh. Well, so I've got a couple of questions about this acting and how it becomes your goal in life. Part of it is you had amazing teachers at school who encouraged you. Tell us a bit about them.
I had very little education. It isn't that I failed the 11 plus. You all know what the 11 plus was, don't you? It was the exam you took at age 11 when it was being decided by the results of the exam whether you went to grammar school, which was for academic pupils, or you went to a secondary modern school, which wasn't. But that was my choice. Can I tell how this came about?
Yeah.
On the day of the 11 plus examination, my home was only half a mile walk from the school where the exam was taking place. And I set off with a bag my mother prepared for me with some sandwiches, because there was a break in the afternoon and during the exams, and we had sandwiches and glasses of water. And I got to a T-junction where 50 yards to the right was my school and the playgrounds. To the left, the road went down the slope into the Calder Valley, across the river, across the canal, across the railway lines, and up the hills into the beginning of the Pennines. And I went left. Now, I've been a socialist all my life, but but that was not my purpose that day. It had nothing to do with politics. I just didn't want to be at the grammar school. I felt it would be uncomfortable. So although my headmaster was very angry and my parents were disappointed, and there was talk about me sitting the exam at a later date, I never did. So I went to the secondary modern school, and there I encountered Mr. Cecil Dormand, who was an English teacher. And from the second year, it was only a 4-year course. I left school at 15 years old and 2 days, born in July. And he, he first put a copy of Shakespeare into my hand. I'd heard of Shakespeare, but I'd never read a line or seen a performance or anything like that. I was just 12. And one day he came into classroom with a pile of books, and he went around the desks dropping a book on a place, not every desk, and naming, and he showed us it was a play called The Merchant of Venice. Never heard of it. And then he would name the character in the play, and the pupil sitting in that seat would read that character. I was the last person to receive the play, and I thought I was going to be left out, which I was kind of relieved about because I was nervous. And he said, "Patrick, you're Shylock." I didn't know, of course, what I was getting into. What?
Not too shabby, eh?
Not too shabby, no. And so he has the second speech. We read Act 4, Scene 1, which is the big scene towards the end of the play where Antonio is on trial because Shylock has accused him. And I started reading these words, and I have to confess, there were so many I didn't understand, I didn't know the meaning of. So the narrative section of what I was trying to read made no sense to me. But there was something else. There was a kind of mild exaltation. That is not a word I would have used then, but it is now, that a feeling of something rhythmic inside me, that when I finally, it was a long speech, it was about 25 lines, when I got to the end of it, I felt so good. And so that was thanks to Cecil Dormand, who is one of the two people the book is dedicated to. The other was a woman called Ruth Wynn Owen, who had been a professional actress and had understudied Dame Peggy Ashcroft numerous times, and Dame Peg and she were very close. And
she did a lot of theatre coaching with you, including on RP, your received pronunciation.
Yes, yes. She became my acting teacher, and I would go to her house in Mexborough in Yorkshire, well, near Mexborough. It was a 2-hour bus ride and then a half an hour's walk to get to her house. And every moment of it was worth it, because being with her and working on a script and listening to her advice was invaluable. Also, she invited, because she was on this course that the photographers of, Brian Blessed and Norman Lambert also came along to our teaching sessions. And because of her, I was able to start losing my accent. She said to me, "Patrick, if you want to be an actor, not even a professional actor, but you've got to be able to speak a variety of different accents if you're an Englishman. And so I think you should start studying RP, which is received pronunciation." And it was the way BBC Home Service radio newscasters spoke then, just that. It wasn't how the royal family spoke. It was not a graduated thing, but it was a standard pronunciation of the English language. And so I began to change it. It was hard work, because I was still going to school, And if I'd talked like that in front of my school friends, I'd have been knocked on the floor. Who the bloody hell did I think I was? And, and so I didn't. But on Saturdays and Sundays, I tried my hardest. Now, you may hear there is still occasionally a twang of Yorkshire in my accent. My family tell me I'm no good at it. I can't do it anymore. I've lost the knack of being a Yorkshireman.
But it's still there, it's still there. One of the other things, you talk about the fact that you learnt to use different voices. You also really frank in the book about the fact that you started losing your hair very young, and
I'm sorry,
you said in the book as well as being able to do different voices, you played with the idea that you could be different people, and you had an audition trick based on the fact that you'd lost your hair quite young. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, dear, yeah. I did. It was all gone by 19. As you see from the photograph of my father, he was also bald. Both my brothers were bald. It ran in the family. So I was not alone. But I had a toupee made. And this was after I'd left drama school. And I spent the most that I could on it, and it was very beautiful. So I would wear it to auditions. I would go wearing it, and they would say, "What are you going to do for us?" And I would do the first piece, and then the second piece, I would, as I was describing what it was, I would take the hairpiece off. And of course, I would see people going, "What's he doing? What's going on?" And then I would do the second piece, and I would then say, rather cheekily, "2 actors for the price of 1. Hey, it worked.
It did work. Well, one of the other things, can we go back to the photo? So I chose the one on the right, because you always had this amazing physique on stage. Can we go back to the photographs? No, the ones before. We haven't talked about the one where he's wearing the loincloth. Yes. So this is you as Oberon in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and look at that stage presence, amongst other things. Tell me about how you embraced all these opportunities, because some actors, I mean, we still have it today, would be incredibly anxious about showing their bodies. I'm going to move on to the next one. Look at the way you hold yourself. That's you as, is it Leontes in The Winter's Tale? And on the right is Antony in Antony and Cleopatra. Over the years, your physical presence is a big part of your power as an actor. I'm interested in how you found it so young.
When I was at drama school, there was a wonderful movement teacher called Raphael Shelley, or Rudy, as he was known, Rudy Shelley. And he talked a lot about acting and physicality, how that when we entered into a role, it was not the same body that we had grown up in and become teenagers and adults in. It was a unique body, and if you could explore it and find different aspects of it that you could adapt and make this new character that you had, then it would make it more real and more believable and perhaps more interesting. So I also loved working out, and I played a lot of soccer, and I played tennis, and I played cricket, and I was very passionate about sports. Nowadays it's jigsaw puzzles, actually it is jigsaw puzzles. It's a passionate hobby of mine, but only paintings. So I get a 1,000-piece puzzle of a great painting and then spend weeks reconstructing it. And the wonderful thing about it is, this is why I'm selling it to you if you don't already do it. You get so close to the painting, you can actually see the brushstrokes, because the jigsaw puzzles I go to are beautifully made. And so I feel intimacy with a lot of great art simply because I had to put all the pieces together.
Excellent. There's one story from drama school I have to get you to tell as well. So you were in drama school in the 1960s. The 60s, as we know, was swinging in this country. But you weren't that distracted by pop culture, apart from your encounter with Paul McCartney. Tell us what happened.
I was at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre, which was my last repertory theatre. I'd moved from weekly rep to fortnightly rep to 3 weekly rep to monthly rep, and that was Bristol. After that, it was the Royal Shakespeare Company. And this was studied. It was not all accidental. This was my plan. And what was your question?
Well, it was, I think, Jane Asher was at Bristol Old Vic with you.
So in Bristol, we had a wonderful company, and one of the members of the company was a lovely young woman, terrific actress called Jane Asher. And we all knew that Jane was Paul McCartney's girlfriend. And one lunchtime, we were sitting around in the pub across the road from the stage door, and somebody said, okay, we're each given £1 million. What is the first thing we will buy? That was the game. So we were going around. It came to my turn, and I said, oh, it's easy, an Aston Martin DB4. And they went, oh, yeah, great. And then we moved on. A week later, the word went round, Paul's out front tonight. Paul's coming to see Jane. And this was a Saturday night. And we were, of course, this was 1964. It was the height of the Beatles fame. And I was in my dressing room after that evening's performance. We'd all been, gosh, did you see him? Can you see him? Was he somewhere out there? And there was a knock at my door. I was in my underwear. But the theatre's different from film and television. People undress and take all their clothes off like the one you saw earlier.
Let's go back and have a look at the same photograph again of Sir Patrick in his underwear. Aide memoir, Sir Patrick.
Well, there was a knock on my door. It was a one-room, very tiny dressing room, which had been Peter O'Toole's when he was in the Bristol Old Vic Company. So I loved the room. And there was a knock on the door. I said, yeah, come on in. And I was in my underwear. And it was Paul McCartney standing on my door. And he had a book in his hand. He had something in his hand that he was clutching. And he said to me, oh, Patrick, I've been told that you like Aston Martins. Here, drive this. And he tossed a bunch of keys to me. And I looked, and one of them was unmistakably an Aston Martin key. And I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, come on, drive it. And I said, he said, look, I'll tell you what, Jane's ready to leave, you get some clothes on, and you can drive us to Bath. I've never been to Bath, okay, from Bristol. And I said, all right, yeah, sure, fine. And so I did. And Paul and Jane sat in the back. And, kind of cuddled up in the back of the seats. And Paul kept saying, come on, put your foot down, faster. And all I could think was, if I kill Paul McCartney...
So you nearly started the Paul is dead rumours right then, 1964.
I mean, that's all I would have been remembered for.
Wow.
Anyway, I didn't, and I got us back to Bristol, and everything was...
Excellent. Yeah.
And he has become a friend, which is
absolutely
still as exciting as that first meeting was.
Well, another friend of yours, Sir Ian McKellen, gave you some interesting advice when you got offered a job to star in a new TV series that was based on the original, a follow-up to the original Star Trek. And you asked Ian McKellen whether you should sign the contract. And what did he tell you? we know he signed it. I'm asking what Ian McKellen said, guys.
Ian said, don't do it. Don't do it. Look, you've got a great career ahead of you on the stage. And in fact, I already had a production of Arthur Miller's, what was it called? Martha, anyway, it will come to me. Okay. That's not it. That's a Star Trek script I'm holding there in that photograph.
Well, we can put up the stills so people can absorb.
I thought, perhaps he was right. I shouldn't do television.
It's because it was a 6-year contract as well, potentially, that you would be committed.
Well, then I learned it was a 6-year contract, and it was 10 months of every 6 years that we would be working. And it was, and then we did 4 feature films after that. So the job that Ian had recommended I turned down actually lasted 12 years. And, he has, by the way, he has admitted this in public, that he did recommend that, and he has admitted he was wrong.
Did you tell him to turn down Magneto? Little twist.
Magneto? What was
that? In
that?
XMen.
Him. Did I tell him?
Yeah, you could have.
No. I mean, XMen was a great adventure. I mean, the first film had such a wonderful cast of actors. And that was when I got to know Ian. I'd met him at the Royal Shakespeare Company. We both were there together, but we were never in the same play. And I was a little disappointed about that because I'd been a huge fan of Ian's for a long time. And then there we were, cast together in this play, in this film, and our trailers were side by side. I think there were like 15 trailers because there were so many leading actors in that in Dune. No, it wasn't called Dune. What am I talking about? XMen. Now you know the truth. I'm an old man. And anyway, where was I going?
Well, we were going with XMen. But I've got a different question, which is, there's something very interesting about the fact that actors with great Shakespearean caliber, like yourself, like David Warner, and in other science fiction franchises like X-Men, Ian McKellen, you all seem to thrive and bring something very important, real gravitas, to these science fiction and fantasy dramas. Why is it that Shakespearean actors bring something so important to things like Star Trek?
The one thing that I can speak of is that Bryan Singer, who directed the first 2 X-Men films, he made a very, very big point of us heightening the language a little bit. And he also talked about the importance of film and acting and how it could in so many ways balance stage acting. And that was terrific advice. And there were so many of us from the theater in the background of the X-Men series that it made life so interesting and fascinating. But it brought me close to Ian, and we shared, but we had adjoining trailers, and they were huge, luxurious trailers. And he would invite me in for coffee in the mornings, and I would invite him in for tea in the afternoons. And when we often worked nights or evening time as well, maybe for a glass of wine. And it was a delightful experience. And Ian has been a passionate friend of mine ever since. And my wife's. He married us, actually. Yep, he actually did. He found some organization, I think it was called the Universal Church, and he got accepted as a member, and it gave him legal permission to perform a marriage ceremony. And he was the one who joined our hands.
Okay. That's lovely. That was lovely. You've taken us somewhere so lovely and spiritual by talking about your wedding. And I want to ask about the costumes on Star Trek The Next Generation. So if we put up the image again, I remember talking to Marina Sirtis, who played Councillor Troy, and her going on about how horrible the costumes were and how difficult it was for women and how unflattering. And given we have been discussing your excellent physique, I was amazed to read in this book that you found the costumes problematic. Why?
Well, they were made of a sort of elastic material. And they were also, we discovered, made one size smaller than we were. So that when you put it on and you zipped it all the way up, it would crush in on you like that. And they were very, very uncomfortable. And so we put together a little team, and we made a protest to Gene Roddenberry, may he rest in peace, who was the creator of Star Trek. And finally, after 2 years, those one-piece costumes were changed, and we were wearing much more comfortable, and I think slightly glamorous uniforms as we are in that photo. Excellent.
When you came to make Picard, the series of the last few years,
yes,
it felt like you had a real sense of knowing how important that role was, but you also owned it, that he was you in the way that you were Jean-Luc Picard. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approached Picard for that last 3 series?
How I first approached Picard was not at all. I turned it down. I felt that after, I think it was 156 episodes of Next Generation, I had said everything there probably was to say about futuristic adventures and a captain of a spaceship. But the 2 producers, Akiva Goldsman and Alan Kurtzman, they met with me and they told me that this was going to be unlike anything that had ever happened before. And I trusted them and believed them, and they created a wonderful experience for me. Of course, the COVID hit the production towards the end, and we had to rapidly finish the season and shut it up. And then we did nothing for, I think, about 10 months. And then we did season 2 and 3 back to back. So we wrapped 10 episodes of season 2, and an hour later, 10 or 12 hours later, we were back shooting the first episode of season 3. And it was a little trying, especially for the old guy in the show, and I was struggling.
But it was lovely because it was also a chance to bring back together some of the loved friends from the Next Generation, yes, by the end. So
in some respects, and I don't mean to be rude about the show because I was proud of it, it was the most encouraging and delightful part of the experience. Those other actors that were in Star Trek with me are still the dearest, closest friends, and we meet and get together as often as we can.
One of the other things you did in lockdown was your online sonnet readings, and which connected with a lot of people. And indeed, over the last 20 years, I've seen many of your wonderful Shakespeares that you've brought to London. You've done The Tempest, you've done Macbeth, you did a very highly regarded Hamlet for the RSC with David Tennant. And then these sonnet readings. you keep coming back to Shakespeare. What is his power for you?
I was 12, as I've mentioned, when I encountered William Shakespeare. And how or why it happened, I don't know, but I very quickly connected with it. And this is how I got to know Ruth Wynn Owen, to whom, this is the other person to whom the book is dedicated, because she instructed me and helped me to understand Shakespeare. And still today, it lives in my life so vividly. And there are two roles I haven't played, and I keep going backwards and forwards because my stamina is not always as good as it used to be. But King Lear, I would like to try that, and also Falstaff in Henry IV Parts 1 and 2. That would be a good experience, I think, for me.
Excellent.
Just give me a moment or so. Sonnet 116. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out, even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
As William Shakespeare once said, hell yes. That was fabulous. Right, we've got some wonderful questions which the audience submitted in advance, so I'm going to go through some of them now. If you could play a part, you may have answered this one, if you could play a part in any play, film or TV show not already that you've been a part of, what would it be? That's from David. And you've said Falstaff and Lear. Can I ask why? Is it partly because they're there, or is there more to it than that?
Oh, well, in the case of Lear and Falstaff, there's much, much more to it, yes. I played Macbeth. I played it for 365 days several years ago, and it was a great experience. It nearly killed me or turned me into an alcoholic. It was a great experience. I would like to play Cleopatra.
That's completely possible nowadays, you know.
Well, that's why I feel brave enough to say it, because I am serious. The best Shylock I have ever seen was performed by an actress. Extraordinary performance. And the turnover of creativity, particularly in the theater, it doesn't happen quite so much in film or television, although there are many, many more mixed races now on TV and in films than there were one time, which is a great thing. But I particularly enjoy the sexual changeovers that have been happening, because Shakespeare is a writer, especially in Shakespeare, whose scripts are so, on the one hand, so simple, like the sonnet I've just recited, and so complex at the same time, that in a way, the actual sex of the person isn't quite as important as it is in other drama.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a question from Morgan. As a Shakespearean actor, what roles have you felt most connected to, and how have they differed each time you played them?
Well, Macbeth,
Yeah.
certainly, although he nearly put me in hospital. I lived that role, and it's not a good thing to do because he's a very, very bad and very, very anguished man.
And he's a serial killer as well, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
Spoilers there, sorry.
Not funny. But there are some comic roles that I haven't played, Falstaff being the great comic role, because I think Falstaff is the most complicated man in Shakespeare, in Henry IV Part 1 and Henry IV Part 2. And I really want to have a crack at it. I understudied him once with the Royal Shakespeare Company, right in my early days with them then. I understudied a wonderful actor whose name, Paul Rogers. See, it came. Paul Rogers, I was his understudy. He did come to me and on the final dress rehearsal of the production and said, Patrick, I'm not feeling very well, and I'm not sure I can do tonight, but I think if I do tonight, I won't be able to do tomorrow night. So are you ready? No. Not ready. Not ready at all. And I told him, and he said, well, you could read it, you know. And, but he made it. He went on, and he was never ill, so I never got to play it. But it's a great, great role. The complexity inside of it is just magic.
It's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen.
I hope so.
Now, you are often, this is a question from Paul, not Paul McCartney as far as I'm aware.
Oh.
You are often recognized for your roles in Star Trek and the X-Men, but what role are you most proud of that you feel is often overlooked? Ooh, good question.
Yeah, difficult question. Overlooked.
Was there a film that you played a pianist?
Well, it wasn't overlooked. It just didn't get much of a big release. That was a film I made called Coda, which unfortunately was just a year before another film called Coda came out, which was brilliant. But Coda was challenging because I played a concert pianist, which is why I feel so comfortable here. And I took weeks and weeks and weeks of classes to look as if I could play the piano. And of course, you know, they used a real pianist's hands for the cutaway shots when they were just seeing hands on keys, you know, cheating, but there you are.
So you were good in that. Okay, another great question from James. Growing up, having the character Captain Jean-Luc Picard as a hero and role model for me inspired a love of science fiction, adventure, and leadership. When you were younger, who acted as a hero and role model for you? That's from James.
I will not be loved for what I'm about to say. I have hardly ever been a science fiction fan. Oh, yes. Groan. Come on, let it out. No, it just didn't appeal to me. And I think that was one of my first problems in the first season of Picard, why I wasn't good enough, I think, because I was uncomfortable.
Okay, but you became a great hero, and I guess it's quite interesting. I think what James would love to know is when you yourself were a child, when you were reading books or going to the cinema, who were the role models for you? Because there were actors who you greatly admired, weren't there?
Yes, yes. I mean, I was in love with Doris Day. Oh. I'm so happy that even some of you remember who she was. Because I know when I say that, it gives away a little hint at how old I am. And Tab Hunter was another actor that I loved. But then one night I went to see a play called On the Waterfront. A film called On the Waterfront. I didn't know what I was going to see, but I used to do that a lot with films when I was a kid. And we had 5 cinemas in the neighboring town of Dewsbury, which was only a 15-minute bus ride away. And I remember standing outside looking at the pictures of the cinema, and it was in black and white, and I'd become passionate about Technicolor. I love Technicolor, which is probably one of the reasons I love Doris Day. And nevertheless, I went to see it, and I'd never seen anything or heard anything like it in my life. I'd never heard of method acting. I didn't know what it was. But that was On the Waterfront. Marlon Brando, Carl Malden,
Rod Steiger.
Rod Steiger, yeah. Oh, yes. With whom, sorry, I've got a friend coming to visit me. Rod Steiger, whom I worked with in my very first feature film. And I mean, the first day we were on, we had one scene together, and we shot it in half a day, and it was in the back of a car, and I pulled a gun on him. Now, those of you who know every frame of every shot in On the Waterfront will remember that there was a scene when the character that Rod Steiger was playing pulls a pistol on Marlon Brando, and Brando goes with his hand touching the pistol. And just moves it aside. You see, I get emotional now at the thought of it. There I was on a film set in the back of a car with a pistol in Rod Steiger. And we had a problem during the day because when they had finished shooting because you always do them, at least some directors don't, but most directors do all the master shots first of a scene, all the big shots, and then they get closer and closer and closer until they're doing sometimes solo shots or over-the-shoulder close-ups and so forth. And the stage manager said, after we'd shot one scene, "Okay, Rod, that's you done for the morning. Why don't you go and get some early lunch, and we'll pick up the other scene you have today after lunch." And we were both sitting in the back of the car, and Rod said, "What about Patrick?" And I said, I'm fine. And he said, "No, you're not." He said, What are you going to do? And the assistant said, "Well, somebody will read in for you."
So it was about someone standing in for Rod Steiger for your reverse shots.
And there was a silence that was filled now with drama. And he quietly said, "Who the fuck do you think I am? You think that I'm going to have spent half the day working with this actor, and then when it's his time, I am going to bugger off and have my lunch?" And he was raging, and I'm saying, "It's okay. It's okay." And anyway, it calmed down, and they shot my coverage, and Rod was there with me. And then when we're done, he said, "Hey, why don't you grab some lunch and bring it to my trailer?" And I said, "Is there lunch?" And he said, "Why?" And I said, "This is my first movie." He said, "Oh, yeah, trailer over there. That's lunch. Get it? That's my trailer. Bring it there." And so we sat eating lunch together, and dear man let me ask him a billion questions, of course, about acting and film and so forth. And just as we were leaving, This is what he said to me. Oh, by the way, just one thing. A camera photographs thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Steiger.
Amazing piece
The
of
most
advice.
important lesson I ever learned about film acting.
That's absolutely. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I have to show the last two photographs I chose. Let's have a look. Slightly random, but we have been talking about your friendship with Ian McKellen, and there you both are. And would you like to tell us about why you're dressed as a lobster?
I think a much more interesting question would be, why are these two photographs on the screen together? Was it my being so close to Ian that turned me into a lobster? I don't know.
I read something into your Shakespearean poise, even as a lobster.
Oh, well, we were working together, and I love the man and love his work and his personality and everything. The lobster was my wife's idea.
Very, very big on
She
social media.
brought it home and dressed me in it.
Learning a lot about your marriage.
Yeah.
I have one more question which I must ask you, which is about Mirfield, where we began this evening, where you came from. You became Chancellor of Huddersfield University when you were asked for many years. And I know that you're going back there to do a talk this month connected to your book.
Next week?
Next week. Now, you'll know there are some people who've come from tough beginnings, who've made a similar journey to success, and they are happy after a certain point never to go back. You do go back. Why is Mirfield so important to you still?
Oh, its impact on my childhood and my growing up, the friends that I had, the games that we played, the skills that we learned, and the good fortune of falling into the hands of a man like Cecil Dormand, who could educate you and give you a good time at the same time. I feel so blessed, as I do tonight, to be sitting on this stage in front of this audience. Thank you.